Dear all, a very good day. Okay, in today's lecture, we are going to look into the cardiovascular system and human heart. Okay, and thereafter, in the subsequent lectures, we will be looking at blood pressure and its measurement. So, to understand how the blood pressure can be measured or the different terms related to the measurement of human blood pressure, we first need to understand the detailed working of human heart. Okay. In brief, we have already discussed this working, in which we have discussed the two top chambers, atriums, and two bottom chambers, ventricles, and how they were pumping the blood throughout our human body. Now, in this part, we will be looking in a bit more detail about the working of cardiovascular system and human heart, what all is covered through it and what all is not covered. Okay, so human heart, it is a two-stage pump. Okay, one is the right heart side, which is made up of right atrium and right ventricle. The second one is left heart, and it is made up of left atrium and left ventricle. Okay, right heart is also known as volume pump. Okay, and it supplies the blood to the rest of the system. Okay, that is, this is the part which is responsible for increasing or for purifying or oxygenating the blood flow and sending the blood throughout the lungs and getting it oxygenated and coming back to the left heart. Now, left heart is known as the pressure pump. It is known as the pressure pump because it has got more stringent task of pumping the blood to the complete body, from tip of our head to the tip of our toes. Pressure pump supplies the blood. Okay. Now, the part through which the blood flows through our human body is known as pulmonary circulation. So, the circulatory path for the blood flow through the lungs is called pulmonary circulation. The circulatory system that supplies oxygen and nutrient to the cells of the body is called systemic circulation. Okay, so this constitutes the flow of blood through our various organs. Like, if we are talking about the oxygen is supplied from lungs. The purification of the blood is done at kidneys, and if energy needs to be supplied, it is done through the stomach. So different parts constitute the complete nutrition cycle of the blood. Systemic circulation is high resistance circuit with large pressure gradient between arteries and veins. Okay, so this complete circulation is a high resistance circuit, and it consists of our arteries and veins. Arteries normally supply the pure blood to the entire body except for, I think, renal arteries, whereas veins veins take out the impure blood from the entire body and brings it to the heart for purification, and it is thereafter taken to different organs for purification, specifically the kidneys, and I think renal arteries are responsible for taking the blood to the kidneys for purification. Okay, so normally arteries are the ones which take blood flow away from our system, and veins are the one which brings impure blood to our system. However, if we are looking at renal arteries and renal veins which takes the blood to the kidneys for purification, so renal arteries take impure blood to the kidneys for purification, and they bring pure blood through renal veins to the human body. Okay, so let us look at the operation of the circulatory system. Okay, we all know that blood enters the heart on the right side through the two main veins. Now, there are two main veins. This is the diagram of a human heart, and in the right part if we will look in this figure, here is somewhere shown a human heart which is connected to our different arteries and veins throughout the body. Okay, so blood enters the human body from two major veins. One is the superior vena cava and one is the inferior vena cava. Now, function of superior vena cava is to lead from the upper part of the body to the heart. The inferior vena cava leading from the body organs and extremities below the heart. So any blood flow from the organs which are positioned above the heart, like human brain and human facial organs and salivary glands and different glands, blood flows from them through superior vena cava into the heart, and from other parts of the body like our lungs, kidneys, liver, stomach, intestine and rest of the part which are below the heart, inferior vena cava brings the blood to the human heart from these organs. Now, what happens after this? The incoming blood fills the right atrium. When the right atrium is full, it contracts and forces the blood through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, which when contracts to pump the blood into the pulmonary circulatory system. So, superior vena cava and inferior vena cava brings the blood to the right atrium. Okay, now when right atrium is full, it pumps the complete blood to the right ventricle. Now, it is a very important point. The valve which separates right atrium from the right ventricle is known as tricuspid valve. Okay, and it is known as tricuspid valve because it has got three small cup type closures which restrict the flow of blood. Further, this tricuspid valve is a one-way valve. It allows the flow of blood from atrium into the ventricle. However, it does not allow the reverse flow of blood from ventricle into the atrium. So when ventricle will contract and push the blood, it will not re-enter the atrium and it will go to the pulmonary circulatory system. Okay, this type of valve is not found in left atrium. There the valve is bicuspid valve. Okay, so when ventricle pressure exceeds the arterial pressure, tricuspid valve closes and the pressure in the ventricle forces the pulmonary valve to open, thereby causing the blood to flow into the pulmonary arteries which divide into two lungs. Okay, so when pressure in the ventricle is increased, the tricuspid valve closes. It prevents the flow of blood back into the atrium. Now at this point, because of the high pressure, our pulmonary valve opens and allows the flow of blood into the pulmonary artery. Now the pulmonary artery is responsible for taking the blood to human lungs for oxygenation purposes. Okay. Now, in the lungs, red blood cells are recharged with O2 and gives up their CO2. Now, the pulmonary artery divides many times into smaller arteries which becomes arterioles with extremely small cross section. Because of this small cross section, the blood molecules and oxygen molecules, that is RBCs and oxygen molecules, can cross over and the oxygen gets reacted with the blood. Now, blood, the very important component which results in this conversion of CO2 into oxygen is because of the presence of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin in the blood attracts oxygen, and because of the reaction between the hemoglobin, which is an iron based compound, it attracts oxygen. Now the CO2 which was attached to the hemoglobin, because of its less affinity for CO2, hemoglobin releases CO2 and allows oxygen to bind with it. In this way the blood gets oxygenated and CO2 gets separated from the blood. However, if instead of CO2 there was carbon monoxide has got more affinity to hemoglobin than oxygen. So in this case we would not have been able to oxygenate our blood, and that's why people die due to CO poisoning. Now, once the blood is oxygenated. All the oxygenated blood return to the heart via pulmonary veins. Okay, so from the pulmonary veins all the blood comes back to the heart. Okay, and the blood enters into the left atrium from the pulmonary vein, and from there it is pumped into the left ventricle by contraction of the arterial muscles. Now again the atrium gets filled with the blood through the pulmonary veins, then it contracts and fills the left ventricle. Now when the left ventricle muscle contracts, the pressure produces by the contraction mechanical closes the mitral valve and builds up the pressure into the ventricle, forces the aortic valve to open up, and the blood goes into the aorta. This is the mitral valve, which is bicuspid valve, and it prevents the flow of blood from ventricle back into the our left atrium. And because of the pressure buildup in the ventricle, the aortic valve opens and the blood flows and goes into the aorta. Okay, from aorta the blood is pumped into the arterial system and the heart relaxes. The pressure in the chamber decreases and the outlet valve closes and the heart cycle restarts. In this way the complete blood is circulated throughout the human body. In the next lecture we are going to look at blood pressure and its measurement related topics. Thank you.